Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, and welcome to the pod where we chat, argue, and wax poetic about the movies that we love, hate, or are simply worth talking about. All movies have something to say, and we enjoy trying to analyze what they capture. Welcome to the Shatter After. How is everybody doing out there? This is Brandon Alvarado, the Scarlett fan here. I'm so excited to be here again on another take of the awesome Shatter After podcast, part of the Novice Cinephile Network, where we talk movies, analyze the hell out of them, talk about everything that we love, everything that we found nuanced, particular, things that we hate, things that we don't like, but more than anything, try to capture that whole experience of that feeling that you get that whenever you leave a movie theater with a bunch of friends, you go to that bar, you go to that restaurant, you have that conversation, you talk about the movie, analyze it to death, and just have a great time. And that's what we do here at the Shadow After. We had a great episode for you guys. Today we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of Marvel's The Avengers, directed by Joss Whedon, the behemoth, or at least the giant that became the behemoth for the Marvel Studios. We're ready to talk about this movie. And of course, we have the entire Shatter After crew and a special guest. We are joined by the great Mike Thomas.
The Avengers had to assemble for this episode. It's a great cast. Can't wait to talk about this classic.
Yes.
Yes.
I got the awesome Isaac Wolf cosplaying as Jarvis.
Yeah, what can I say? I find it interesting talking about old sour milk.
Ooh,
Awesome.
Ouch.
And we have the founder of the amazing Fanboy Podcast, the founder of Superman on Film, and our in-house Tony Stark enclosed in the Fortress of Solitude, my cousin, Mario-Francisco Robles. What's up, man?
Hey, I am super happy to be here. I remember when you were talking to me about this podcast you had in mind called The Chatter After, I don't know, like a year ago. And here we are. You've got it. You've launched it. We're doing it. And we're going to talk some Avengers. I'm ready.
Yes. So I figured, as routine as we do, the first thing we want to get out of our systems is talk about that first time, that first moment. You're the guest, Mario. So let's go back 10 years ago. You're in the theater. You're watching Avengers for the first time.
Whew.
Talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Talk to us.
I should start by talking about the expectations I brought with me into the theater that night, because I got to be honest, they were sky high. I had been super impressed by what Marvel Studios had done in the 4 years leading up to it, between Iron Man and all the other Phase 1 films, that I came in thinking, oh my God, this is actually happening. For the first time in history, we're going to have a movie here where we've spent years building up each of the individual heroes, all leading to this culminating moment where they all come together to face one giant outsized threat. This has never been done. For me, as like a lifelong DC guy, remember, I saw 4 standalone Superman movies followed by 4 standalone Batman movies. There had never been anything that even teased at a cinematic universe before, a coherent, cohesive, shared world where now all these heroes live and play in the same sandbox and they're fighting the same enemy. Like, this was completely uncharted territory. Right. And for me, the hype didn't even begin when the first trailer for the Avengers came out. No. The hype came out when they announced at like the end of 2007 what their plan was going to be. When we heard that now there's a Marvel Studios and next year they're going to be releasing Iron Man in May and Incredible Hulk later that year, and then Thor or whatever. Like, when I first heard this ambitious plan, that's when the hype for me began for this. So I should point out that I came in probably like unnecessarily psyched. I probably like unrealistically ready to love this thing.
So you literally flew into the theater.
I mean, listen, I was gliding that day. For me, that whole week was leading up to Thursday night when I go get to see the Avengers. So the first viewing, I'm very happy to report, did not disappoint one bit. I'm sure we're going to break things down in more specific, portions as we get through this episode, but the short version is I came in with sky high expectations and I left feeling like not only had they been met, but in certain cases it actually had been surpassed. I had a couple of moments during this movie where I got so excited that I literally like shouted in my chair and gave myself like I blacked out a couple of times. So we'll get to those specific moments as we go through this conversation. But suffice it to say, my expectations were sky high, and the movie beyond met them.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Isaac, Jarvis, your thoughts?
Well, I wasn't as excited as Mario. I was more went along with my friends. I mean, I thought, okay, this looks like fun. Give it a shot. Okay, that was fine, but that's about it. And when it first came out, and what?
No, I love this. I love your sincerity. It's variety, what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And
you're giving me stuff to work with, Isaac.
And sort of like, I never really thought. Maybe it's because, well, when it comes to Marvel, back when I was younger, I was never really an Avengers guy. I was all about X-Men, so maybe that's why. I will admit.
That's a good
so.
Point.
Did it meet your expectations at least, Isaac, or were you just saying, it happened?
Did you have expectations?
I had no expectations. I'm just, it was a fun time there, and so I didn't really.
It wasn't a bad time.
It's sort of like what would Jeremy Jahn say? It was you don't remember in T-minus 1 week or something like that for me. Sure, I remember more the movie vividly, and sort of like when I rewatched it, I could okay, that's gonna happen. So in essence, I gave it, and I haven't rewatched it since. I watched it one time back 2 years after. Now this is my third year rewatch, and even though, well, we go into that later, I will have to at least give it credit for that. I do remember it.
Talk about damning with faint praise. So what did you think of the movie, Isaac? Well, I remember it.
I feel like that's pretty good, though, because a second ago he said he wouldn't remember it in 10 days. But here we are 10 years later, and he still does remember it.
Damn.
It was
the sour milk taste stayed with you.
Mike, that was just was me just trying to give a sort of like how the feeling was after I watched the movie more than anything.
Yeah,
I get you.
Okay, so it wasn't an event for you. It was just you watched a movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. Sometimes that's a good thing. Mike Thomas.
Yeah, so the Avengers was a very big deal for me because 10 years ago, I'm 15 years old, so 25 now. It's crazy how much life has changed since that movie came out. But I remember I wasn't a big Marvel guy. I was a big DC guy growing up as a kid. So Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, The Incredible Hulk, that was my first introduction really to those characters anyway. So as far as expectations, I didn't have any idea what the Avengers was going to be about. But I loved all of those movies going up. I loved the teaser at the end of Captain America, the first Avenger, because me being 15, I wasn't that guy who knew that this was going to lead up to a thing. We accidentally stayed in the theater at the end of Iron Man. And
that's amazing. You accidentally stayed.
Yeah, we were just
because it wasn't talking. A thing.
Right. Yeah. We were just talking during the credits. And the next thing we know, the movie just kept going. Yeah. And we're like, what is this Avengers thing? And so every time we saw the Marvel logo, we're just like, you think there's something going to be at the end of this one? And it just kept going over and over.
Yeah.
And then Captain America happened. I'm just like, oh, this is going to be like the Justice League. Okay, I get it. And so when that movie came, it was amazing. It was an amazing feeling because at that point, I'm a full-on Marvel fan at that point, right? I've watched the cartoons, the animated movies, played the video games. Exactly. That 5-year period when they led up to Avengers basically built me for that moment. And so I got all the references and Easter eggs like, look, Odin's crows are watching Loki and Thor right now. I was the expert by the time the movie came out.
Yeah,
and it didn't
By the
disappoint.
way, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it didn't disappoint. I loved every second of it. Going back, it's not my favorite Avengers movie, but it's still a blast. I still have fun with it every single time I watch it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add before Brandon gives his 2 cents on what his first experience was like. I should add, Mike, I was a lot like you. I didn't grow up on the Avengers. I was not a Marvel guy. And if anything, the only Marvel I was into was Spider-Man, who was nowhere to be seen in that movie and didn't look like he ever would be at that time.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny to think how much has changed since then. But at that time, it was very clear there's going to be no kind of Spider-Man in any of these plans that they've got coming along. So I think, to me, that's another one of the big monumental things about the movie is I was not into any of these characters, and I didn't really care about the Avengers at all. But yet, through those 5 years of grooming, as Brandon put it, by the time the Avengers came, I was full on, give me Mjolnir and give me the shield and give me, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Like I bought in, because to me, just the mere ambition, the scope of it all had never been done. So I was rooting for them to pull off this ambitious plan. So I was just hooked in, even though up until that point, I had never given a crap about Marvel. But okay, Brandon, what were you going to say? It's your show.
To T from you, and I love how you said that. You mentioned the ambition multiple times, because I think I know you a little bit. I mean, you're my cousin, but your ambition with this type of film or this event is twofold, because it's not just the whole geek side of you, is the whole acting background, because you're seeing it in terms of cinematography, cinema, film, right? It's something that covers different milestones throughout different genres and areas that interest you. So it just, because, and the reason I say that is because it's funny that you say that your hype started when you saw the announcement.
Yeah.
When you heard this first thing happened.
Yeah.
And my hype started a summer in Puerto Rico when you came to visit. Oh, you remember this, don't you?
It sounds familiar.
And so, one of the things that Mario hated one thing from me as I was growing up when I was a kid, and is that every time I would come to him, I would say, question. And Mario would always be like, Brandon, why are you saying question? Just
you don't have to preface every question with the word question.
But
that sounds like Brandon.
But I see my cousin as this wealth of information in a world that I have no connection with. I mean, the internet's not there, but he has this ear to the ground and he knows all this information. So I would just ask him questions. And
so
like,
basically
I knew
use your Google or Siri, right? You'd be like,
yes.
Hey, Mario.
And not only
answer
that,
this
he lives in New York. So I only see him, I don't know, once every 2 or 3 years. So every time he's close, he knows I'm burning his ear off for information.
I've got to download a lot of information into this young man.
I'm like, so like, for example, the big thing for me was like, I remember that summer we were talking about, I knew we were talking about Iron Man, but we're talking about Dark Knight. But he was telling, hey, Brandon, so they're going to bring Bane on The Dark Knight Rises. So that's like kind of how the conversation started, because he already heard about it. It's like, oh my God, this is awesome, Nightfall and all those things. But I remember that we were talking about Iron Man. We were talking about Hulk. He said about the idea of the plan. He literally became Nick Fury in my living room. And
there was an idea.
So that's where my hype started. And then when it got to the point to go to the theater, to me, so Marvel's The Avengers was the movie that made me a full-on geek in terms of the event of the scope. I was like, oh my God, this is huge. Like, I went to see it in theaters 5 times. I was grabbing people and saying, hey guys, come. I was dragging people to theaters to go see this movie because I was like, this is so huge. This is so amazing. This is so awesome. And it's funny because it's not just a great movie filled with great moments. There's so many nuances throughout that makes you go like, okay, this is something that I've invested in. And the people making this film know that I'm invested. So there's also this type of communication with the audience that you really don't see in film often, especially when you're trying to build this type of universe, right? So it just hit me in so many levels. And to think that this is the film, which now I want to go into the analysis portion of this, is that when you think about it, this is the film that made Marvel Studios mainstream. It wasn't Iron Man. It wasn't Incredible Hulk. It wasn't
those
Thor.
began the process, but the
Exactly.
Avengers was the one.
And those were big movies for people that already knew what was being cooked in the kitchen. Like the people that knew who knew. It's like when you go to a restaurant, right? And you go with a friend, and your friend knows the chef. You're just gonna let your friend handle everything, right? So like that was us. We knew who the chef was, and we knew what they were cooking. But almost the rest of the world didn't know, because I think this is the first Marvel movies to ever make $1 billion.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's the first movie to break records. It was like the #1 movie all time for a long time, right? And it is also the movie that made Marvel Studios a household name. And then the beauty about it is that we were part of this. I feel that we were part of a moment in history. And that's
because we were the ones who bought the tickets that made it that big hit, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, but we also saw it in the making.
Yeah.
And the idea that we can watch a film that will make us go back to watch the previous ones, and also to think that there's people that watch Marvel's The Avengers that never saw any of the other ones. Like that was their first contact with Iron Man. That was the first contact with Hulk. We're not going to count Eric Bana. Their first contact with Thor. Like a lot of these people never had any contact with these characters. So you got to think about it. This is a movie that, even though, like, I was watching it again today, preparing for the pod, right? And I kind of, because the only way you can watch it now is watch it with foresight, because you're already seen everything else, right? We're already in phase 4. Like, you know what's happened, you know what it's building, you know how it got to that point. So there's no way, there's no first watch with this again. It's not like one of those movies that you can go back and watch it and it feels like a first watch, because it doesn't have any connections, or it doesn't have any other hands anywhere else. This one will always have that sense of you're not able to unconnect the dots that have been connected, right?
It's crazy because I was watching it and I was sitting here like 90% of this cast in the MCU is dead now.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just like crazy.
That hurts. That hurts
A lot.
I was bringing up a sore spot there, Mike.
Yeah, my bad. Blame Thanos.
One of them comes back. That's spoilers. No.
2 of them come back, actually.
A lot of them come back. 50%.
Look at you, Agent Coulson.
But it's the whole thing about a lot of people coming to first contact with these characters, and to think about it from that year, that's a lot of heavy lifting for a film to do, because you got to think about it. For us, we see it as a culmination of a story that this franchise is telling, right? For a lot of people, it's their first experience. And how many people came out Marvel fans out of that film?
I'd argue a great deal.
It's crazy.
Probably.
Like have we? And it makes me think. That's how you know that this was a film that was made with all this care and love, with a lot of interesting characters. I don't know. Did you guys have experiences with people that hadn't seen it before and watched this one and were like hooked with it? Did you drag anybody to the theaters to see this?
Well, on my end, I can say I pretty much exclusively hang out with fellow nerds. So everyone who saw it had already seen pretty much all of phase 1 and knew what was up. So I can't. Yeah. Anyone else here do that?
So it's funny because I was actually one of the people who got dragged into this franchise.
Oh, like Isak.
Nice.
So my parents saw Iron Man, and I was the Batman fan. So I'm like, I don't care about Iron Man. I'm gonna go see the Dark Knight. Whatever.
Yeah, that was the same year Dark Knight came out. Iron Man and Dark Knight the same year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it's like Dark Knight came out. Spider-Man 3 was just the year prior. So as far as Marvel, it was Spider-Man and X-Men. So I'm like, okay, who cares about Iron Man? But they were like, no, watch it. It's really good. So we went, saw Iron Man. And at that point, it's like, okay, we have to see what this Avengers Initiative thing is going to be about.
So I gotta watch the next one.
So every movie that came out, I ended up taking, but the friend group got bigger and bigger. It was cousins, then it was aunts and uncles, and then it was friends from school or church. And then next thing you know, half the theater is probably folks that I already know going to see Avengers. And so it was just a really unique experience, right? Because it's something that you saw just build and build, and everybody's favorite movie from that phase is different. Some people loved Iron Man. Some people really were into Thor. A lot of people.
Let's rapid fire that real quick. Mike, favorite phase one movie?
Ooh, probably the first Avenger.
Brandon?
Thor.
Isaac?
I don't remember.
Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, First Avenger, Marvel's The Avengers.
Incredible Hulk, then.
Okay, all right. I'm going to have to echo Mike and go with the First Avenger. That was the phase one movie that really grabbed me.
Yep.
So great. Such a good film.
Such a great. We watched it again for a film session that we were doing, me and Mike and I, and it's just so many.
And it's so underrated. Yeah.
Yes.
People kind of wrote it off like, oh, it's kind of cheesy or corny or whatever. I'm like, no, this movie is foundational and it nails that character. And shut up.
But you know what's funny? It's funny, and that's one of the funny things that you bring, the fact that it's a foundation and that it got the character, and that people say it's corny, and I'm like, you are aware it's a period piece.
Yeah.
And it's shot like if it was shot back then.
Joe Johnson that's what he does, man. Johnson.
And he did a great job.
Yeah.
A period piece about a guy named Captain America. I mean, that's going to be a little cheesy. Come on.
It's going to be, but you know what? If you don't walk in expecting that, then you're the problem.
Right.
There's something. Do you read?
Yeah.
But yes, I love these characters. I love this film. Now, we talked about the heavy lifting. We talked about bringing people in. I like what you said, Mike, about the fact that as the movies kept coming out, the group got bigger, families, friends. And I love how Marvel Studios, leading up to this film with our close people, but also after this film, because it became such a household name after the Avengers, there was no one in the street that you cannot talk about Marvel films that wouldn't know what you weren't talking about. This is the movie that put Marvel in everybody's mouths. And I loved about it, because up to this day, Twitter is blowing up with everything. But
Moon Knight, Multiverse of Madness, all that great stuff. It's trending all the time.
Yeah. And just to put into perspective, though, the success of the film, it made $1.5 billion. And up to that point, the big one that had kind of led to that was Iron Man 2, which topped out at 623 mil. So the jump in business, and none of the phase one films even came close to $1 billion. Then the Avengers comes out, $1.5 billion. So that goes to show you that it had steadily built up over those years. Mm-hmm. But also it probably means that there were a fair amount of people who saw it who perhaps hadn't seen those, who went just for, like you said, just because it's an Avengers movie and we got to see what all this is about. Yep. But that is quite a jump. When all the phase one movies sort of topped out at 623, and suddenly the celebration of phase one makes more than double that. It just goes to show you, they really built their blocks appropriately, and there was a lot of anticipation for this.
So let's talk about why it became such a huge hit, because one of the hardest things that they were able to accomplish in my book is the fact that they found a way to grab all these very different and unique characters and make them work together. Because when you think about it, in the bare bones of this film is paint by numbers. There's nothing complicated about it. I mean, it's literally villain shows up, get the band together. The band doesn't like each other. The villain gets, the upper hand. The gang gets back together. they beat the villain. That's it. That's the film. That's
they
all
all
that
go their
happens.
separate ways at the end.
Exactly.
It's pretty much, funny enough, it follows a lot of the same beats as your typical romantic comedy, where you distill it down. It's boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl, the end. And this same thing happening. The team meets each other, then they have their falling out, then they get back together, happy ending. You know? Yeah.
Exactly. But what makes it so interesting is the fact that they embrace the differences of all the characters. If there was one particular nuance or a relationship that stood out to you in this film, what was that relationship, Mike?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like a very underrated one, which might not be underrated now, is the relationship between Natasha Romanoff and Bruce Banner, right? Of her being tasked to bring in the Incredible Hulk and convince him to join this government agency he's not trusting of that at all. You know, and so I just think that's a really interesting relationship and kind of how they work together in this film. And I feel like the director, Whedon, felt the same way because of what we see in Age of Ultron. But I think that relationship is just a very intriguing one. Of course, you have Stark and Steve as well. But I feel like when you first start off the movie and you have that scene where she's interrogating this mobster and she has to go get the big guy, I think that is one of the most interesting parts of like the first act of the movie, because we're following this Bruce Banner that we don't know, right? This is a different actor. So as the scene's playing out, when you're first watching it, you don't know who this is really, because they don't refer to him as Banner right away.
Right.
And so you're kind of just figuring out this cat and mouse game until you start putting the pieces together. It's like, oh, okay, the Hulk's going to show up pretty soon. And then you see all the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents outside the little hut.
Well, what about that moment of palpable terror when he sort of gets in her face for a second at the thing, and you see her eyes well up instantly? Here's a woman who's seen some stuff. All right. She's got a lot of red in her ledger, right? She's seen some stuff. She is abjectly terrified of this man because she knows what he becomes. That I thought that was pretty badass too. Yeah.
It's a great moment, especially like you see how quickly she grabs that gun.
Yes.
I was gonna go right into that. Think about this. How powerful that scene is, that from the moment that she shows up in that cabin, that character is in control of the room, is in control of the conversation, that she actually moves to the table where the gun is at as the conversation develops, to then when he acts out, pulls the gun. Because I had to think about it. The gun wasn't on her. So she's actually controlling all the scenery and all the conversation, which makes you think that's the type of character that she is. And I love the fact that you brought the beginning and you brought those characters, because it makes me think about also what an impressive way to start the film, because you got to think about it. No matter who watched the previous movies, right? Robert Downey Jr. has always been Robert Downey Jr. Right? So you can't deny that Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and Samuel Jackson were probably the biggest names in this film, right? By the time this movie came out, right?
Yeah.
So you got to figure about it. He's the biggest actor in this film.
And they save him for pretty deep into it.
Exactly. The movie doesn't start with him.
It's like 20 minutes before we cut to start.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's that close-up of him making the arc reactor thing.
Right. Whatever. So not even him, Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
And it's the fact that they take the time to introduce these characters, which are the nuanced characters, the new characters, but also the idea of, we're going to show you these characters first because we want you to know that they're part of the team, and making those choices, those artistic choices. I love that, because again, like you said, we don't know who this guy is until we find out that he's the Hulk. Well, wait a minute. We're thinking, wait a minute, where's Edward Norton? And then the other people are thinking, oh, the Hulk, that's awesome. So, yeah, that was just a very nuanced thing that I was thinking about.
And by and large, I feel like the opening of the movie, when they're getting all the building blocks in place, a lot of it seems to be aimed at getting you to invest in the more human members of the team. The ones who are, instead of diving right into the demigod or diving right into the larger than life characters, we're spending a little more time with the human people, because that helps kind of ground everything. And it also it gives the audience a way in, because we're viewing these characters like the humans view them. In a certain level, kind of like how Mike was saying, we don't know this Bruce Banner. So we're looking at this Bruce through Natasha's eyes, and I feel like that was probably by design. We're like, if we're going to have a story that's going to get so big and there's going to be an alien invasion and there's Thanos at the end, we got to find where to connect. Yeah, we have to have our way into the story. And the way in is through the more human characters.
Right.
And I think go ahead. No, I'm just saying, I think that foundation is what makes this movie work so well for the larger MCU, right? By the time you get to Endgame, you're attached to these characters. They're basically like members of your own family, right? Yep. Yeah. And so going back to that specific scene, though, you were talking, Brandon, about how she's like casing the room and she's in full control. I love that moment where Banner acts like he's about to Hulk out, because that also shows he understands what's going on. He wants to see how far he can push the situation. Yep. And since she didn't pull the trigger, I think that's what gave him a certain level of trust of like, okay, we figured each other out. Everything's on the table. Let's go.
Yeah.
So the first 25 minutes, it's all roll call, right? But I like the fact that each character brings their own world with them. Because first of all, you mentioned that teaser for at the end of First Avenger, right? If you remember, the post-credit scene was the Avengers trailer.
Yeah, that's right.
Which it wasn't just the balls, right? That's right. That's the reaction. Yeah. But the idea that you have all those characters, you have the roll call and all that stuff, all those characters connected with each other. I lost my train of thought now. I just said the balls and I got so excited.
You brought up the balls and there it went.
There it went. So you mentioned Banner and Natasha.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mario.
Yes.
Do you have an interaction, a moment or two characters that you enjoyed that were different and you found it surprising in the film?
Well, in terms of interpersonal relationship stuff, I think it's really interesting that they start right away developing the rivalry between Stark and Rogers and their ideological differences.
Yeah.
Because it shows you right there where they were heading with this. They were playing a long game. They were already thinking about Civil War. They were already thinking about what's going to happen when this team eventually splits up. And you know what I mean? I think those scenes in the helicarrier where you're kind of seeing Stark and Rogers at each other's throats about their different ways of trying to fix the problems. That always just kind of spoke to me, because I kind of got the sense even then, I'm like, this thing between them is going to be a central theme for a while, and then it ended up, they went very far with it. But I'd have to say, the differences between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, that dynamic, I think, was very important and very sort of pivotal to some of the drama there, the turning point in the middle of the movie.
Isak, do you have any particular relationship that you enjoyed in this film between two different characters?
First of all, we talked about how Robert Downey Jr. is the big actor in it, besides Samuel L. Jackson, and I wonder where that's where the entire budget went. But I digress.
The movie's 10 years old, man. Lower your expectations.
I mean, there was a CGI army. I'm just saying.
It's
Leviathan's in the air.
I digress. But when it comes to the relationship, it's the Bruce Banner and Tony Stark, just seeing them different
science bros.
Science bros.
That was the thing, right?
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was also the one that I find the most interesting regarding to characters' interactions.
Nice.
If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've mentioned this before, but I want to make this my interaction. It's the fact that I like the fact that I was able to grab every single character and remove them and put them back in their universe. And when I'm putting back in the Avengers movie, they're still the same character. Now, I mentioned before that one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Phase 1 movie is Thor. Why? Because I am one of those. I'm the one that didn't really enjoy Ragnarok that much, and the reason I'm sorry, Mario, and the reason
Thank you.
and the reason I say that is because to me, Thor is the one we see in the first film. It's the over the top, this mythical personality, right? And I like the idea that when you see Thor in Avengers, he does feel like this larger than life god. And so he is still Thor, right? That when you go into the comedic side that you see in future films, I've come to accept it and I found ways to enjoy it, but it also kind of disconnected me from the character because wait a minute, he stopped being Thor. Now he just crims Hemsworth with two hammers. But this film was still Thor, and I remember that one of the things that I loved the most was that the fact that Mjolnir sounds like Mjolnir in Avengers blew my mind.
Oh,
so yeah, something so stupid, so simple, but that's my interaction. Thor and Mjolnir. What was that?
No, you're a fan of continuity, right?
Right. But more importantly, the idea that that's the same sound effect. The fact that they took the time to do that. Also, the idea that you have the themes of the different characters coming together, and
I mean, if I can, but truth be told, I think that's one of the areas that I wish were stronger. Where like we hadn't quite established a musical motif for each character yet. Marvel hadn't quite, gone out of their way to do that. Like I've always said, imagine how amazing would it have been had there been a piece of score in there. Imagine during the Battle of New York that plays like a bar of each hero's theme as they do their superhero thing. There wasn't really any of that because I think only really one of them had an established melody of any kind.
Well, there was a theme for Thor that really goes through from movie to movie, and it kind of makes an appearance on the Dark World, but we don't talk about that film.
I want to piggyback off of that right quick if I can.
Go.
I just think that just shows how powerful the Avengers theme is, right? Like,
yes,
even at like this theme doesn't appear in Age of Ultron. Like, you may hear a hint of it during like the credits of that movie, but it never appears in Age of Ultron. But it's so iconic and so memorable. That shows how much people love this movie. That when they bring it back for Infinity War, chills, right? It's amazing because it's the one motif that people actually remember from these Marvel movies, and it appeared in this film. So great.
No, and the fact that Alan Silvestri, by the way, I think he's done the score for every single Avengers film.
I believe it or not, Danny Elfman did Age of Ultron.
Yeah. Yep, he did.
That's why this motif doesn't appear.
Yep.
Damn you, Elfman,
man.
Freaking Elfman.
I bet the Batman theme probably would have been there if they allowed it.
He did the thing.
Lord knows he is one to stick that thing into anything. So,
oh, Justice League.
Anyway,
that's what she said.
So Alan Silvestri, I know he did First Avenger.
Yes.
He did the Avengers, and then he did Infinity War and Endgame, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I love, and here's where my musical thing goes crazy because he gets that motif. He broke the actual theme throughout the entire film. And it wasn't until they were together that you have the iconic scene over there in Manhattan. Which, by the way, every time I walk through there, don't you get chills, Mario? You walk through Park Avenue and you're like...
When I drive through the Park Avenue Viaduct, all I could think about is fighting the Chitauri.
Yes.
So,
you just drive your car into the forces. But that's the first time that we heard that. Like, how many... This was just me. When I bought the DVD or the Blu-ray of this film, I was just watching that moment back to back. I was like,
what, the circular shot of all of them assembling?
Yes, like the third act that leads to that. And I would just listen to them. I would listen to the soundtrack as I'm driving to work, and I could just see it in my head. It was.
I'm sure Isaac can say the same thing.
Isaac.
I'm sure Isaac just hums it all the time and thinks about that sequence, right, Isaac?
Honestly, when it comes to the score, it's one of my least problem with the movie.
Oh.
So
See,
you're not
Least
even
problem.
saying
That's a positive.
See, no, no,
my least problem is the score. Raves Isaac of the Chatter After.
I love how he says that it's not one of the best things of the movie or one of the good things. He says that's one of the things I have least problems with.
Here's the thing with this movie that I just talked about before when we goes into the budget. Looking back at it, when just looking at the Dark Knight versus the Avengers, just in the cinematography, it's on film, it looks more modern than what the Avengers does. The Avengers looks like a more high-budget TV film than anything. It doesn't look like it have the kind of budget that it has. On top of it all, we talked about it during the Amateur Taco with the on the live-action Cowboy Bebop. The whole interaction, the dialogue, and the set designs just makes me just it feels dated, and in a genre just as comic book movies, it shows more jarring than let's say Infinity War or Endgame, or dare I even say something like the Winter Soldier. There is leagues more. It's so jarring in comparison in how set design, dialogue, and all that. Yeah. Sure, we have the Whedonism to some extent left. I shouldn't say Whedonism left, but this whole quipping stuff like we didn't put in the Avengers, yes, but they have blended it in their own style so it fit more directly. But when you hear that Whedonism going in full swing in the Avengers, you just realize this isn't. This isn't. When did Buffy came out?
Mid 90s.
Yeah, it's not. It's not the 90s, which the Cowboy Bebop movie series actually felt like it was produced.
I gotcha. So I see what you're saying. A lot of people have pointed out that it felt more like a TV movie because Whedon himself came from television. This was arguably one of his first major feature films. Yeah. And it's not shot in like an auteur would shoot it. It's not shot in an artistic, mythological type of way. It looks like a movie you'd see on ABC 7 at 9 o'clock on a Friday. I got you. And I can't argue with that. It's not very visually breathtaking in that regard when it comes to the cinematography and all that.
And I would just add that yes, and having a $220 million budget, looking like that, then I just have to ask how much of the pay cut did Samuel L. Jackson and Robert Downey Jr. take, because that movie doesn't look $220 million budget at all, and then that's probably not counting in the marketing.
This movie looked like shit.
I know you want to blame Robert Downey Jr., so just do it, Isaac. It's fine.
Hey, Robert Downey Jr. is one of the best parts in the MCU, so I'm not blaming him.
See, I'm glad how he's not saying the best part in the movie. Yeah, he's just saying the.
So I've got that's a lot to unpack there, Isaac. Yes. But I
appreciate you bringing it to the table, Jarvis.
Yeah. Let's tackle the budget concern right there. I feel like you're joking about it going to the actors and it looking cheap. I would still say though, like this version of the Hulk is probably still my favorite design of the Hulk in any of the MCU films. Also, you have the Chitauri, you have Thanos. So the budget is probably going to the action scenes.
That third act cost a pretty penny.
Yeah, like that's what 30 minutes right there. The movie right there.
When did Michael Bay's the Transformers movie? I am talking the second and the third came out, because that one looks more into the budget than what the Avengers did.
Oh, okay. There's no convincing you that it looks better, but I'm just saying that's probably where the money went.
Let's spin this. Let's spin this a little bit then, because I think that you're not wrong, Isaac. Because you have a point. We're not going to take it away from you. You do have it. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, which I'm glad that you mentioned Whedon coming from TV, Mario seconded, is that for me, when you compare this film with the other Phase 1 pictures, this feels like a comic book. It doesn't feel like a feature film, especially the way it's edited and the way it's cut. It feels like panels, especially when you cut from like the whole Steve Rogers flashback scene. You can easily see that as comic book panels when you cut from then and go straight to, because, and also how the conversation starts with some characters and then it ends as a voiceover for the next scene as you're introducing the other one, right? It feels very comic booky in the way that it is shot, in the way that it's thought out, in the terms how characters are introduced, the interactions are created, and stuff like that.
But
Because
should it transition like that too? We talk about how live action is a completely different genre than in the comic books. The animated movies sort of like that, because let's face it. So, I don't. Do you remember the whole debacle of Wolverine's comic book accurate costume in as
Right.
was it after credit scene in the Wolverine?
The Wolverine. Yeah, it was like a delay scene.
yeah,
It wouldn't have. There's a difference in the all. Kidding aside, and it's all going back to the X-Men. There is a good reason why they did ban X-Men. Wouldn't fit in the, it wouldn't even work at that time, considering how they wanted to approach it. Sure, they wanted to be a more comic booky, but we also need to look like non-comic.
No, and I don't disagree. And I don't disagree with your point.
Us geeks.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with your point, but the point that I'm trying to make is the idea that all that was by design. And I think that's the key here, because yes, there's people that try to do a certain thing and then the execution is just not there. And we've seen it with multiple comic book movies and live action. Cowboy Bebop live action being one of the best examples of the execution just being all over the place and not even landing anything. But the idea that they set out to do a thing and they did the thing and the thing paid off. That's the point. That's actually justifies what you're saying, but also makes me think all that was intentional. Because you got to think about it. Also, from the perspective of this being the first Marvel movie that a lot of people saw, that gave them the feel of what this universe is going to look like moving forward. Because can we agree that after the Avengers, everything felt a lot more comic book, even as it did all the serious turns with the characters? Because you got to think about it. The most serious turns of these characters came after the Avengers. Because even though you could say that the whole demon in the bottle aspect in Iron Man 2 was serious, it was very loosely, wasn't really the center of it. But the most serious turns, the most comic book turns came after this film.
I never even realized that. You're right, because straight from that, everything got real serious. Iron Man 3 was with the PTSD about the Battle of New York. Winter Soldier was the intense fight between Steve and his best friend. Thor: The Dark World, even though it sucked, was a more serious movie. Well, that's in Phase 3. But in Phase 2, things did get quite serious. I didn't
even Age of Ultron got a little more intense than the first.
Right. like and not only that, you're bringing people like this guy, the one that played Ultron.
Oh, Robert California.
James
Spader. The original Daniel Jackson from Stargate.
Yes. But it's the idea that this was going to be like, they knew that this was going to be the jump off point for a lot of people. So everything was intentional. And I don't know. I love the fact that it felt, not only that, I was watching it today and a lot of the dialogue feels like it feels very corny and very like because apart from the fact that I've been reading a lot of comic books lately, like I'm like in a comic book like hole that I do not want to take myself out of. But I was able to catch all that and all the nuances. Like, and I started watching the movie today and I was like, yeah, these are just panels. They're just going through, and I don't know. It was interesting.
It's funny because Joss Whedon also wrote some Marvel comics too before this, and so you can feel like his X-Men run, the DNA is in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned this in our Doctor Strange episode. The Marvel Cinematic Universe just feels like a comic book franchise, right? In the sense that this is Joss Whedon's run on Avengers, and it feels different from the Russo brothers' run on Avengers, right? You see these characters. Yeah, you see these characters, we get attached to these characters, but then a different writer comes in. So you liking the first Thor, and then a new writer comes in for Ragnarok. I would still say it's the same version of Thor, and you just see his evolution, and then a new writer comes in. Art's different, stories written a little differently. Even if it doesn't jive with you, you might be able to come back to the Thor franchise when it changes writers again. It feels just like reading Marvel comics. And so that's one thing I really love about the Avengers. It feels like, you guys know the New 52, it feels like the first Justice League story, right? Where we get introduced to the Justice League, and then we spin out and get Capullo's Batman and all that great stuff from there. It feels like it's that basic introduction to the world, and then it's like, okay, we can get crazy, give it to different people, and let them run wild with it.
That was a great observation that you said that, because it also makes me think about, I mean, there's no way we're not going to talk about Kevin Feige. we got to talk about the Feige and his hats. But the fact that he knew what he was doing and what he was handling, and the fact that I think what's make all these movies in this universe so successful is the fact that he's always treated them for what they are. You know how a lot of films or a lot of adaptations, especially when it comes to sci-fi or genre films, they kind of try to hide the fact that they come from a comic book, or they try to hide the fact, like, for example, that's one of the gripes that a lot of people can have, like with the Dark Knight trilogy, because Nolan wanted to make it so hyper realistic. He kind of wanted you to forget that Batman is a comic book character, right? Which is why the Batman for a lot of people is so great, because Matt Reeves embraced the fact that Batman was a comic book character and that his world came from someone's imagination as opposed to the real world.
Yeah, you forget that Batman's greatest foe is an actual clown.
That's
kind of weird.
Yes.
But no, but you're right though. Like, Feige's approach here was totally different up to what had been done to, by and large up to that point. A lot of film adaptations, a lot of comic book adaptations had done the thing where, like, we're going to take a few core recognizable facets of this property, but we're going to dress it up differently, and we're going to adapt it in our own sort of way. Like the original Fox X-Men movies, where, like, you'd never see them caught dead in their actual comic accurate suits. It was all black leather, and everything had to be like streamlined to look more like what Hollywood action movies looked and felt like at that time. The Feige model, the Marvel Studios thing, seemed to be much more, let's just embrace what we are. We're a comic book company. We're going to adapt these comic book characters. So therefore, the characters should look and feel and behave and have all the powers associated with their comic book counterparts that people have spent decades getting attached to. So that was I mean, he wasn't the first one to do that, but it definitely, it was like the biggest stab at something like that, the biggest attempt to really just embrace the source material and adapt it straight without putting your own spin on it.
Yeah, which is funny because I like Isaac, not to discredit anything you said, but I feel like that's the appeal of this franchise, right? It's that they did embrace in a time where we did have Nolan's trilogy.
Yeah,
which is great. I think love it.
I think they approach it much better post Avengers.
That's fine, but again, this was the first attempt, right?
Right.
And it's funny. I just checked the budget for Transformers 2, and it's 195 millions, and it came out 1 year earlier, and it actually looks like it used the budget.
But it had
the budget episode.
But it only had Shia LaBeouf in it. Shia ain't throwing out RDJ money, okay?
But at least the 3D looks like it's they used the money for.
I mean, no one's arguing against the fact that Joss Whedon is not a good filmmaker as Christopher Nolan or even Michael Bay.
Apparently, Michael Bay. Yeah.
I mean, Michael Bay has some decent movies here and there. It's very sporadic, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like again, not taking anything away
from Transformers movies, but I can give him credit that they look on par with the budget. That's what I'm saying.
That's totally fine. I'm just saying, for most people, it wasn't that big a deal. That's all.
Yeah, I honestly, I've never thought that the Avengers looked like it had cheap, crappy CG. I've always I saw it again, fairly recently, and I remember thinking this holds up pretty well. Yeah. So I don't know, Isaac. I think your subjective opinion is you expected it to look more, I guess, photorealistic or nicer, but I don't know. I thought it looked pretty damn great.
And I like the fact that
if you guys like it, I'm happy for you. But you guys, you all know that I'm not afraid of speaking my opinion. Heck,
I know.
Well, we know this. That's why we have you here.
Heck, yeah. I said right on the recording that I didn't like Godfather. So, but anyway.
All right, we're gonna save that one for a whole other episode.
No, we already did the episode. You're good.
Okay.
He's the one.
Well, I want to film a fanboy where I just yell at you for saying that.
Okay? All right, guys, this is going to be a reaction video now. Let's do it.
But gathering everything, even the budget, gathering everything we talked about and talking about the Feige, I think I said it in a Twitter post a little bit ago, and I've said it multiple times, and I've had this feeling, especially watching Moon Knight, is that what I've loved from Marvel Studios as a whole is that they set out to do something and they double down on the characters. They believe in these characters. And no matter how many obstacles or failures they've had, because we got to admit, not everything's been the Avengers, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But they carry through and they continue to their plan. And taking from Mike what you mentioned about Joss Whedon's run, right? What a great example of that than the underrated The Incredible Hulk movie. Because you got to think that after the whole thing with Ed Norton blew up, right? The fact that he wasn't coming back, that could have been the moment where Feige says, "Okay, we ain't doing Avengers. I mean, we can't do it." No, he said, we are a comic book company. We're making comic book movies. We change writers and actors all the time. Who's going to play our Hulk? Because you got to think about it. That's how he approached it.
Yeah.
That's how he approached it. You know what I mean? And that idea, that feeling has been carrying them through for all the movies that they've made, which is why we keep paying money.
And something Ben Affleck has said when doting credit and praise upon Feige is that as a producer, he just seems to know what his audience wants really badly. He's got his finger on the pulse, and he knows he can anticipate what's going to work and where to take things next. Affleck has said that about, when speaking to Feige, it's unbelievable how he just knows his audience and that he's used to working with producers who are trying to figure out how is this going to go, or we're going to try this, or this is a risk we're going to take, or this is that. Feige's just like, no, this is what my people like to see, and this is what we're going to do. The fact that he has the vision, he sticks to it, and he knows it's going to pay off, and he's usually right. I mean, I think that's why they say he's got the Midas touch right now.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it takes me back to the movie that we're actually talking about, right?
What was that again?
The Avengers, I think.
Oh,
no, the budget of the Avengers. Now, so I want to bring this to the table.
I'm not gonna live that down anytime soon, aren't
I? Ever. This is the day. No, we're not My Hero Academia.
The day has come.
So, how many
anime nerds? Go on.
Yes. How many things paid off in this movie? Because
I mean, everything.
I know, right? Like, this is one of those films that there were so many things that paid off. Like a lot. How has there ever been a film that you go to it and the film doesn't just give you what you're looking for, but then rewards you because you've been following its trajectory?
Well, Can I just say, guy, earlier I alluded to the fact that there were 2 different times where I like screamed and blacked out.
Yes.
Let me just get to those real quick, okay?
Let's
in terms of things paying off, okay?
Because I think we can take this moment to do best favorite scenes. So,
sure. Look, so I'm sitting in a sold out theater in Times Square, New York, Thursday at 7 p.m. watching the first official showing of the Avengers in New York. And I'm sitting there. I'm delighted through all of it. Okay. But now we get to the New York sequence, and the thing happens where that big Leviathan is coming, right? And Bruce rolls up on the motorcycle, and he's coming, and Bruce seems chill. And then he says that line about how, you want to know my secret? I'm always angry. And he turns and he punches the Leviathan out of the air. I sprang up out of my seat. I don't know what happened to me. Yes. I lost my mind. I sprang up, shouted some sort of obscenity, felt a head rush go to my head, and I had to sit down. And I literally felt like I was recovering from like a fainting, which I've never felt before at a movie, mind you. And then a few minutes later, this is also Hulk related. When Hulk grabs Loki and just starts ragdolling him all over the floor. Yeah. For some reason, because listen, I'm a lifelong Hulk fan. I should mention that. Of all the Marvel characters, Hulk was always the one that did speak to me. I grew up watching the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk TV series and stuff. So seeing the Hulk rendered in this fashion, doing this cool stuff, and then taking Loki, the god of mischief, and just beating the ever-loving crap out of him. I was another one where I stood up and I'm like, I don't know why I'm standing, and I had to sit back down. But and then once again, I got like the head rush, because you're not supposed to just spring up like that after 2 hours of sitting around. Yeah, who knew? But yeah, so that movie paid off, and I had 2 of the most physical, visceral responses I've ever had in a movie theater, 2 times in that movie in the third act.
Awesome. So Isaac, before we go to Mike, I want to go to you. Did you get the same reaction when you saw the budget, or
you're not gonna letting that one go, aren't you?
It's not gonna happen. Now, well, okay. Budget aside, was there a moment that you went like, "I like that"?
Or as Isaac would put it, I have the least amount of a problem with that scene.
No, it was the interaction between Banner and Tony. That's the one thing that I like the most.
Yeah,
honestly.
Okay,
that's great. That's great.
Great,
Mike. Favorite scene or scenes?
Okay. Well, I love this movie, so that's going to be hard to narrow down. But I will point to one moment. This is also in the final battle. It's just really funny and a personal moment at the theater when it happened. So we have the great one shot, by the way. It's a fantastic action scene where all the Avengers are fighting throughout the scene.
Amazing.
That's the Iron Man, Captain America.
Yeah, it's that moment where Iron Man flies by Captain America. He pauses and he reflects off of the shield.
Yes.
What makes that scene special to me is that weekend, my sister and I were going through Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. And that is a combo move from the video game that we would do every single time. And so when it happens, again, this is 10 years ago. So my sister's incredible. 11. And so she's just like, Mike, they did the thing. But behind me, this stranger, he just whispers to himself, oh, crap, that's from the video game. And so it's the entire audience had the same thought, or at least around me had the same thought in reaction to that.
That's amazing, actually. I will give you that.
There you go. Wow.
That's awesome.
And it's things like that, though, where it's if Marvel Ultimate Alliance did this, I assume this is something that has happened in the comics before. Because I don't think Feige would pull from a random video game on the PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's those little nuances, right? Sprinkled throughout the film that makes comic fans happy, that makes fans of the other mediums happy. And that's why the Marvel family just keeps growing and growing. Because even if you enter from the video games or the cartoons, it all starts to pay off. And that's what we're talking about, right? How it all kind of builds on each other. And that's why this universe is still going strong 10 years later. Because those moments right there speak to different people.
And honestly, that involving your little sister, and then as you said, you got into this because your parents saw Iron Man, and this whole thing about the group growing, and you're having aunts and uncles and grandparents. You're like, I think that's something else that needs to get pointed out, and credit needs to be given. These Marvel movies have been made in such a way that it doesn't matter how old you are. This is an event you want to be a part of, and you can be a part of and be included in, and not feel like if you're an adult, you're not going to feel like you're being patronized, like this is some cartoon little kid thing. And if you're a kid, there's stuff in there that's like for you to think about and follow. And as you grow older, you want to go back and rewatch them. But even still, just to look at on the surface level, you're seeing your favorite heroes do cool things. So it's still cool for you no matter what. Right. But the fact that like these films have reached such a broad cross multi-generational audience, I think is something else that deserves to be applauded here, because that's what makes those moments in the Avengers stand when you're in that packed, crowded theater and everyone's having this communal experience. That's what made when we all went to see Endgame and you hear the people cheering when Steve shows up and he says, Avengers assemble, and there's people sacrificing babies. That's what does that, though. It doesn't happen. If you're only playing to one little niche audience the whole time, that niche audience will be happy. But these movies built and became like a cultural phenomenon. They became our Star Wars from the 70s. They became our mainline trilogy. And it was because they had a come one, come all sensibility to how they told these stories. And I think that deserves a lot of credit and spotlight if we're talking about what they got right with this Avengers movie and pretty much all of the MCU up to this point.
For sure.
100%. When it comes to me about favorite moments, favorite scenes, it changes because I overanalyze everything, and I love the movie so much, like I know it from the bottom of my heart. But as I've watched all the films now, right, and my appreciation for certain characters has increased, and others have changed, have shifted alliances. I still go back to the whole thing about the fact that I'm listening to Mjolnir and is Mjolnir. But I don't know, it always gets me. I remember I was in the theater and I heard, and I was like, literally, like that was my response. I was like, for me, that was they did the thing.
Yeah, they did the thing.
When it slams on the shield and you just hear it go, so great.
Oh, and by the way, when I saw that scene today, you know what I thought about? Oh my God, that's where they got it. That's where they got it from for Endgame.
Yeah.
That's where Steve got it from. Like,
they do it in Age of Ultron too, where he just holds it and he's just like, Thor just says they're lining up for us. They do it again. And I love the fact that the connectivity.
But to me, it's all the Avengers together. The roundabout scene. That's like for me my favorite scene. But with my love for Cap, I think Cap is like my favorite MCU character right now. I've grown to be like 100% Team Cap.
Team Cap, Team Superman, best teams ever.
Yeah. So the fact that Captain America is officially placed as the leader, and he gives instructions to each of them, understanding who they are and what they're best at, and how they can handle themselves in the battle. To me, makes me think, like when you mentioned about the whole shield and the reflective thing, in my mind, I'm just like you. I'm not thinking that Kevin Feige played PS3 Ultimate Alliance and that's what we're gonna put this in the movie.
But he is a war veteran, so it makes sense that he makes the order.
Right, but the whole thing about knowing the character so much that you're looking for ways to combine them, that just feels logical, right? But when he's giving the orders to each of them, and they each go to their places, Iron Man sounds how Iron Man clutch up Legolas, and he takes Hawkeye, right? That whole interaction, and then Steve goes, Hulk, smash. Like the fact that he said smash, because he understands that in this particular state, Bruce Banner's not necessarily all there. So he just give him one single thing, and you see the big smile in Hulk's face. It's like, yes.
It goes back to the beginning of the film, though, right? Where he first meets Banner, and they have that awkward interaction. He's like, so what else did they tell you about me? And he's like, that doesn't matter, right? Exactly. Because he knows the Hulk. He probably even knows how to trigger the Hulk and how to communicate with the Hulk from his file.
That's why every time that Tony's doing his thing is like, are you crazy? Like we start poking him and
right.
He starts poking him in the middle of the science lab. That was just awesome. But that's my moment because that's the moment they became a team. And I like the fact that from there on out, when you see Hulk, he's just being Hulk. When you see Thor, he's being Thor. You know, and the fact that I'm able to appreciate all their individual identities throughout the film. It's not, for example, Mary, you made a point with the original X-Men films that all of them look like generic Power Rangers. Like even Power Rangers have different colors. They all look like, yellow spandex. No, it's black spandex, which is why it makes me think, because as soon as you said that, it made me think about First Class. Because
when they finally did embrace.
Exactly. Which makes me think like this is probably them going like, why are we hiding what they look like? Look at Marvel.
Yeah.
You gotta admit, Matthew Vaughn went like, Marvel's doing something right, and he's not putting people in black spandex. How about we give people what they want?
Yeah.
And Marvel Studios did it first. Which I think it's a way for us. I think this is a good moment to start wrapping up. It's just a film that it's a huge celebration. I think you said it originally, Mario, that this is just a celebration of everything they've done up to this point. And the fact that the celebration hasn't ended, because it's been 14 years of content
and counting
that we can all go and pick our favorites and share with people. And when you go to someone and say, hey, this was my favorite of phase 2 or phase 3, they'll go like, you know what? This one was my favorite. And you can go and say, why is that one your favorite? Because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. And I don't know, it's just a powerful social phenomenon that we're going to keep talking about this
I agree. And if I could just give one last thing about Avengers that I thought it really nailed and that makes the movie special, is that its emphasis on heroism, its emphasis on trying to save the civilians, trying to minimize the casualties and the collateral damage. Those moments where you see Steve, Captain America, talking to the NYPD and working with them to try to minimize civilian casualties. The stuff where there's different moments throughout where you're seeing people on the street looking at them and reacting to what our heroes are doing, and we're seeing how our heroes are impacting the humans around them. And then even after the scene has happened, the battle in New York, they're showing like the newsreel clips, and you see the whole world is reacting to what the Avengers did. And you're getting that sense of the good that they inspired, the help that they offered. Like, I feel like sometimes in superhero movies, the emphasis is too much on the explosions and on the action and on making everyone look really cool and badass. But it's like, to me, what always makes these movies count, or what makes them go to that next step, is seeing heroes save lives and inspire people. That's what makes these stories really connect with people. If it was just a bunch of cool people doing cool things with cool powers, it would be a far more hollow experience. And I feel like Whedon was great about that in this movie, where yes, we have an alien invasion. Yes, the stakes are really high and all that, but he made sure to remember the people on the ground. And he made sure that we knew that our heroes were worried about those people. I think that's important, and something that, more comic book movies should keep in mind,
I'm glad that you said that, because it makes me think about the idea of a hero. It's something that Marvel has very clear what that complete package looks like. And from there, they put different colors and different takes, but they don't break that package. That complete hero package is always there in different shapes or form. Like, you change the character, you change the powers, you change the story, but you still see that complete package, right?
Yep.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, and it made me think, because I just watched the film a little bit ago, is that once Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Cap are on the ground, before they all come together, every decision that they're making is to protect civilians.
Yeah.
Every single thing. Like, it's not directly to engage the enemy. Is people are in trouble, people are stuck in the bus, they're stuck in a chamber, or the cops don't know what to do.
Mhm.
It's like it's all that. And I love the fact that you also mentioned the idea of a superhero being a badass. But Captain America, First Avenger, you don't only see him saving people, you don't only see him giving orders to save people. He has a badass moment in front of those cops, because talk about that moment where he gets there and says, "This is what we need to do. We need to do a barricade all the way to 39th," and that NYPD cop goes like,
"Why should we listen to you?"
And then this is why.
Yeah.
And he kicks the ass of all these Chitauri, and then
all right, we're gonna listen to this man.
Yeah. Exactly. Like the complete package. And I love that we get that out of these hero movies, which is one of those. I don't know if you guys have seen Moon Knight.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be recording the Fanboy podcast in a few minutes with Brett, where we'll be discussing the finale of the Moon Knight.
So I'm going to say this without any spoilers, but I love the fact that that particular season, talking about Marvel Studios as a brand, right? That particular season ends with completing that hero package, especially towards the middle of that last episode. It's all about heroics and what heroics should look like, Marvel style. And I like the fact that that formula is still there.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
And it all started in 2008 with the drunken billionaire.
There was this idea to bring together a group of remarkable people. Yes. No, but like I love the ending of that movie, right, where it comes full circle. Like Fury says they're going to come back because we'll need them to, and that is the most comic book thing you can do, right? It's like your heroes are going to return. It even ends with the Avengers will return. And that moment still sends chills, even though this set of Avengers, they're gone. We're probably going to get a new group of Avengers later on. It's moments like that where that's how you realize the Marvel formula is the characters, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of other films where it is the action, the spectacle, the cinematography. The budget's really nice, but those characters suck.
No comment.
That was for you, Jarvis.
Oh, it looks great and expensive, but these characters are what?
Anyway, yeah, it's just.
I love how you're saying, Mike, that it is the idea that endures.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
This is awesome.
All right.
Any final notes, guys, on the Avengers? Isaac, would you like to revisit the budget one last time?
No, because it's pointless of doing it. So at this point.
Well, is there any other thoughts you would like to share with us?
I would argue that we run out of budget mentioning in that one.
Oh my God. Mike, final thoughts?
Isaac, you said but. Did you have anything else right quick?
No.
Okay. Final thoughts is I just love this movie so much. I love how this was a celebration of this film. We didn't really get into like specifics too much, but I just love how we were able to appreciate what this film means, not just for the Marvel universe, but for Hollywood as a whole, right? Like how many, for better or worse, cinematic universes have pretty much failed, crashed and burned.
Yeah, it's the only one that's really pulled it off.
Right. It pulled it off, and I think talking it out, we figured out why. It's because it did go against the grain. It was being more comic booky while everything else was being more serious. It focused on characters instead of spectacle. And then, like Isaac was saying, in phase 2, it starts to balance out, right? And so now we reached like the perfected idea of what this movie should have become by the time you get to Infinity War and Endgame and films like that. And so I just love seeing where this starts. It's like watching TV. You go back to like Flash season 1, right? Where it's a great season. You get to see the origin of that character. And then season 2 just takes it on to a whole nother level. So that's what I love about this movie. And I just really got to talk about it with you guys.
Yeah.
MFR?
Final thoughts on the Avengers? I mean, what I feel like we've really we've beat the horse dead that we love this damn thing. But let me think. If there was just one other thing I could say, is just, I think that tone of celebration was definitely there in the theater, and I feel like that is a unique thing that we don't really get too often anymore.
Yeah.
Where these movie experiences have become this like communal thing where we're all in this together. And like if someone were to try to get up during the credits, you'd go, no, sit down. There's another scene.
Exactly.
Like,
Yes.
you know, we're in this, you know, like that vibe of like we're on this epic journey together. It just makes it so unique. And the Avengers was arguably the first time where we really got to test that out, right? Yeah. Because, you know, Iron Man and all those Phase 1 movies, you know, the popularity was ramping up and it was what it was. But when the Avengers happened, this was like we got to now see the full potential of what these people have been building. And chances are most of us saw it in packed theaters because this was a hit movie, and to like get to now see the potential fulfilled and be in on that sort of crowd pleasing, just we're in this together type of thing. I mean, it's a special thing, and I wonder if we'll ever get it again, you know, because I know Marvel continues, but post Endgame, you know, I'm curious to see it. Are we ever going to get to another one of these types of films that brings everyone in together to follow this next big chapter in the story? You know, I'm curious. I feel like it's very hard to replicate it, you know?
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I remember the idea that we felt this, for me, at least 3 times, because I got this excitement in Infinity War. And if you remember, when Endgame came out, I made it a point to say, Mario, I'm coming over to New York. We're going to watch Endgame together. And,
remember, you got me into Infinity War because the first time I saw it, I was a little, I don't know if this was worth all the hype. And you basically flew to New York to tell me I was wrong.
Yes. And we went to see it again.
Yes.
And
That's
you were like, damn it, Brandon.
Move.
Damn it, Brandon. You're right. And then I flew back again for Endgame.
Yes.
And we all did the thing. And we all did the thing.
Amazing.
So what I'm hearing is that we have to go to Sweden now, right? And convince Isak that this was a good movie despite
Yes.
No,
and that the budget was reasonable and accounted for.
Yes.
Don't worry.
I have to follow up with reason and when, but that's besides the point. We don't need to go into details there.
Yes. So, MFR, it was awesome having you here, man. To talk.
I'm glad to be here. I look forward to the next movie we can chatter after.
Yes, and chatter before. So, had a great time, guys. This was an awesome episode of the Chatter After. Mike Thomas, where can people find you, my brother?
You can find me, first off, here, almost every single episode of the Chatter After. And if you're watching the video feed, that is youtube.com/NoviceCinephile. You can also follow me at NoviceCinephile on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram is the NoviceCinephile because somebody sniped my name. Don't know why. But that's you can also check out my work at collider.com and, of course, the Amateur Otaku podcast.
Nice. Isak, where can people find you, my man?
Well, you can find me over at my work at Movement Entertainment, and you can find me on Twitter at Emblemaniac, and you can find Amateur Otaku Pod at the Amateur Otaku Pod.
MFR, where can people find you, man?
You can find me over on the Twitter at Superman on Film, all one word, Superman on Film. I also have my weekly podcast called The Fanboy Podcast. It goes up every Friday. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it in wherever your podcast app of choice is. So yes, follow me at Superman on Film and check out The Fanboy Podcast.
And you can find me at The Scarlet Fan 52 on Twitter, The Scarlet Fan 52 on Instagram, and The Scarlet Fan 52 on TikTok, even though I have no idea what I'm doing there. And you can find me at The Shadow After and every single take. We keep analyzing movies every 2 weeks, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have it awesome, guys. Peace.
Hello.